Hi, welcome to the developer commentary for Pacific Drive. Today for LudoNarraCon, we're going to be talking about the ways we layered narrative and storytelling into this game that at first glance, as you can kind of see, can sometimes look more like a car mechanic simulator or a spooky driving game or many other things. All of them are true, but there's so much more to talk about with this game, and we're going to touch on that today. I'm Karrie Shao. I'm the lead narrative designer and lead writer on Pacific Drive. I've also written and worked on narrative for League of Legends, Perispera, Not Tonight 2, and a handful of other games. In the driver's site with me today is Nicole Olson, narrative designer, who is an expert at driving this game and will be playing and talking with me as she goes.
Heck
Want to say
yeah.
hello, Nicole?
Hello. Yeah. Unlike Carrie, I do not have like a extensive history. This is my first like proper shipped game, and I've
Ready to
done
make this
QA and
remnant
design and
verification a
narrative
one
and
and done
writing and
thing?
editing on it. So
I'm sending you to visit Colossal
Yeah,
Kappa.
Nicole
If that
did
old
so much
anomaly
on this
doesn't
game.
induce
It's
electromagnetic
incredible, and we'll
resonance in
touch
your
on that
car,
as we
then we're
kind of
free
go
from the
along too.
Bias's fever dreams and we can get you
So if
out
you're
of
not
here.
familiar with this game
With that
already,
antenna fixed, you can now
Pacific
detect
Drive is
stabilized
a
road
driving
junctions in the
survival
Alpha
game.
Zone.
You go out
You've
on
got a stable
drives
route
to
heading straight
scavenge
to Cappy's front door,
resources
with the
and
energy readings are
explore
off the
an
roof.
alternate version of the Pacific
I advise you
Northwest.
not to take his
That's
own
essentially
taxi.
become an
Better
exclusion
gear
zone.
up or you may not survive the trip.
You spend most of
Which
your
would be
game
well if you say
behind
so.
the steering wheel
Your
of an
call.
old wood-paneled station wagon, which you're looking at right now. That's your only companion in this game. And together with it, you are going to make drives deeper and deeper into a world filled with anomalies and weird sci-fi things and dangers and a lot that just doesn't make sense to the human eye. Um, in between your drives, you have an abandoned garage as we are in it now. You've got a lot of tools and kind of things at your disposal in this garage. This is essentially your base where you can tune up your car, review what you found on the road, and plan your next drive. So what you can see Nicole doing here is kind of getting ready for the unknown out there, right? She's gassing up her car. She's making sure her parts are um, still parts and that her doors still seal the car off and crafting a bunch of things she's going to need on her drive. And it all makes sense why she needs it once we head out from the garage. Um, this game, as I mentioned, is truly a lot of things when it comes to the design systems. Like when you're out, the car can take on quirks that you have to diagnose. These are weird things your car does. Like maybe you turn on your windshield wipers and your gas gauge goes along with it. Um, Other things that happen in this game, there's anomalies out in the world you're going to see, how they interact with you and your car and every little part in your car. There's so much this game truly. And we're going to touch on the narrative of all of those items. But again, as this is LudoNarraCon, we're going to focus on the narrative today.
yeah.
Um, yeah, is that I guess let's go on. So we're leaving the garage right now. We're getting on the road, and soon you'll see it's a route that Nicole picked early on in the garage. That is going to lead her on a few stops on the way to a mission.
Yeah, we're gonna head on and do one of our quest missions here, our main story quests. Um, we've got our route planner here. We have every time that I go through one of these, I make sure I check like the junction conditions and things like that, specifically whichever weird things. Like this time, we get to figure out what malfunctioning mess is, and maybe we can scan some stuff and see some new things
Yeah, all
along the
those
way.
junction conditions and all that text you see on the right side are things you've learned while out on the road, right? So this game truly is about exploring a very unfamiliar, very unforgiving space and kind of documenting it and as you go, if you want to, right? Or you can just kind of enjoy yourself and drive and I'm going to say the word fight, but you don't really like fight the anomalies so much. You kick them off your car and such, but there's a lot to explore and do here, and so much of it is kind of the experience you make of it, as with the narrative as well. As far as how we approach the narrative in this game, it's layered into a few different ways. So at the highest, most tactile level, as you can see here, as Nicole is interacting with the car, right? She just pulled the shifter. She's looking at this kind of GPS sort of map that is a monitor mounted in her driver's seat with all of these kind of doohickeys and gadgets around it. This is your car and the mechanics in which you interact with your car and all the parts you build and attach onto it is is uh is narrative, but it is gameplay kind of like married together. And what I mean by that is the story of the game is the car is something that we call the remnant. So you found this car, you were sucked into this exclusion zone, you're not exactly sure how. You're alone in these woods and you find this car, and it seems to kind of shelter you a little bit. It reacts to you, it saves you from radiation in practical way that a car kind of would, but it also does weird things, right? If I think Nicole's probably too good at this game at this point to die. And if you die, it will kind of like ferry you back to the garage somehow in the mysterious ways that sci-fi things do. Um, and you know that is inherently, again, tactilely what you're doing as a player in the game. But the story is that this car is the kind of the long lost revival of a urban legend, an old urban legend in this zone, of which there are very many. Then remnants are these kind of old objects that you can stumble across in the woods, and you become obsessed with them, right? They can be an old record player, an old car, for example, and you become obsessed with it, eventually to your own demise. You become so obsessed with it, you start to block out the rest of the world, and maybe you forget to feed yourself. You start to take it out into the woods and take it out on excursions, and you're lost to it in a lot of ways. And as you play this game, as you forge on through many, many hours of this game, you find yourself really poring over every detail of this car, and that's layered into the story as well. I asked Nicole earlier when we were getting ready for this stream how many hours she had played the game. Nicole, do you want to admit to that?
Oh, I am very happy and comfortable admitting to that because I started here at Ironwood doing QA, so I am like well over 2,000 hours at this point combined between playing on PC and in editor and also on our PlayStation 5 dev kits as well. So
Yeah, this is some like expert mode driving you're gonna see, and she makes it look really easy. But I, a known terrible driver in games, cannot do most of what she's doing now. But anyway, at a high level, again, what she's doing right now is that she is on her way to the mission in the upper right. You'll see that there is a mission that she is headed towards, and she is kind of exploring along her way, scavenging for resources because you know you need fuel and parts to get to the next map. And what she did there was she just scanned it. You could see the picture that kind of captured from her viewpoint. Do you want to talk about scanning a little bit here? I guess since we're looking at it, Nicole.
yeah, since we have the opportunity, scanning is done through like you have your mechanic's eye, your trusty mechanical eye, to kind of scan the weird things that you come across in the zone and find little snippets of information that have been left behind in the zone. So like this here is one of the abandoned Arda cars that was left behind or damaged and couldn't be salvaged, and have a little transmission fragment from Gil O'Hanlon.
Yeah, and shout out to my writer, Paul Dean. He wrote the lion's share of all of the written text you get in these logbooks and a few other locations in the game. And as you can see, I think one thing that I really loved to have players discover was you scan an object, you think it's going to give you all the information about it, and it does, right? It kind of adds to, like, as you saw earlier, when you are heading into a map, it'll show you what resources, you know, what cars, what might be on this map because you've scanned it before, but also, like, it just gives you a little fragment of story, right? So that's kind of a what I like to think of as an optional encounter with story, where you scan an object, you don't have to read it at all, but you certainly can, and there's like encyclopedias worth of information there for you. in ways that are about the people who used to live here's experience with the object, right? Uh, it could be, you know, again, someone's experience with the object. I think the last one was probably a government employee, because this is a government vehicle. At some point, you're going to scan some anomalies, and it can talk about encounters with them and troubles people in the past have had with them. And I like that. We kind of drip feed you the lore, which is there if you want it. It's all in your logbook menu, and you don't have to read it. You can just continue driving and be perfectly happy reading it later, like in your garage when things are safer.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really nice piece of the logbook that we wanted to make sure that we had in there, right? Is that obviously like everything that you haven't read is marked as unread, and there's things like the user manuals for folks who want more info, but the rest of these are logbooks, and some of these are definitely more helpful of like, you know, reading about an anomaly when you're safe in the garage and when it is not actively trying to ruin your car and your drive. But there's also some fun stuff we've done. We've worked pretty hard on putting lots of like customizable accessibility into the settings. So you can even change the settings to, you'll notice like right now if I open up the logbook, that like you can see in the background that the car is still moving, because this does not currently, this by default does not pause the game, but like we have a setting for that for folks who are definitely more interested in like, I want to read it now and I also don't want that to kill me. So
Yeah, and you'll normally figure that out by not having that setting enabled by default and then dying or being like, what's happening? My car is getting dragged off a cliff for some reason as I'm trying to read this wonderful lore.
yeah, just casually reading a story and then you know, your car's gone.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I didn't know this car had cruise control. Oh wait, that's bad. I'll just kind of chime in here. One of my very favorite kind of like, there's so many ways in which the like pure mechanical game design of this game and the narrative design like had a wonderful like marriage of like a moment. And that's like, as you saw when Nicole like scanned the object, the picture of what you were just scanning, like your literal like viewpoint, gets added into the logbook. And for me, I was like, that is so cool. I saw somebody online, I think it was like either the forums or on Twitter, saying that they were going to scan every object, but make sure their car was like in the frame. So it was a literal
Yes.
logbook of their journey through the zone, exploring it, documenting it with their car, like, you know, alongside like posing with the peace sign in the frame,
I love
um,
that.
which was incredible. Like, I want that person's save file because I have not scanned everything in the zone. There is a lot.
Oh yeah, there's so much. Yeah, our the achievements are specifically based off of like a specific number of the logs and not like full completion. For that very reason that there's so many things in there. But that also highlights a really good piece of like the customizability of like the real beauty of being able to look through somebody's logbook and see all of the different photos. So like specifically in that case where somebody made sure that their car is in there, is that you get to watch it go from like the absolute lowest of the low, ancient, like rusted, beat up station wagon to, you know, you get to upgrade to your high quality wood paneling, and then eventually get into the more high tech, fancy upgrades that come in late game.
Yeah, that was such a nice surprise to have that be part of the narrative, right, of exploring the zone of like when you kind of go into making these things, these systems can be, you know, very separate sometimes by nature of we are separate teams, right? Like there's like the design team and there's narrative design. And in our case, you know, our I did narrative and the writing of the script, and so did not always have time to like make sure everything was captured and reflected perfectly on all the teams. But like we all lived in this world, we knew it really well, and we had these guiding pillars to which we were heading. And so things like, you know, making sure as you care for the car, as you grow more obsessed with every, you know, square inch of this car, there's like a story reason for it, or this logbook that, you know, you have this, like as Nicole said, this yearbook of moments, sometimes shortly before the disaster, that you saw these like anomalies or anything you scanned is really lovely.
Or you get really lucky and it is the exact moment of the disaster.
I'm always just scanning things by the skin of my teeth, right? I'm not like, let me wait for a safe moment. Let me make sure my car is like, in park and in the right place. I'm just existing.
Just hop out, leave it in drive. Parking brakes aren't even real. Just run into danger.
Parking brakes are overrated. You heard it here.
For sure. Yep, official.
I believe we're about to. This is CRM, right? We're about to load into.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So this is kind of like in the game, you can go on a bunch of supply drives, just go around, collect resources, or you have these kind of more like story missions that stack on top of each other, right? So right now, you have been given instructions to head towards this
Sierra.
ruin of a town called
This
Sierra.
place ever again. Head toward town. Colossal Cappy is smack dab in the middle of where Sierra used to be. You can't miss it.
And as I mentioned before, we have this layered story. So you have the story of the player, your own experience with the car, your experience on these drives, right? Like things that you encountered, ways in which you you finish your drive by the skin of your teeth with, 2 health on your car. But there's also the story of the world. And as I was writing this game, I really, I worked with Alex Dreycott a lot to kind of focus in on what we wanted to talk about. Who was the main character of the story? Was it the player character? Is it the car? Is it, Appy, whose voice you just heard, or many other things? And we ultimately really wanted it to be also the story of this world, right? So as I mentioned, you're on the Olympic Peninsula, which is west of Seattle. It's a real place, except that this is like a alternate reality exclusion zone version. There's been some science gone wrong. It's been turned into a government site, and it's been abandoned for over 30 years or so at this point. And so as you are experiencing and heading through the zone from this first person lens, which is the player, you'll quickly maybe understand that it's more of a world story, right? You have all these personal experiences with it, but you're out there learning what happened here. Why is there a weird floaty blue light, in front of you right now? Why is there that weird floating mechanical thing that we saw a little bit earlier? Why has the zone been abandoned for decades upon decades? The world is kind of full of mysteries, and the reasons why you've been sucked in, the reasons why there are these characters talking to you over the car radio, was absolutely a focus that we wrote to. Because look at it, you're surrounded by this gorgeous lush world that our art team so beautifully put together and level designed, and we wanted to tell the story of it. One thing that I think, Nicole, you can speak to a little bit more, as you do live in Seattle, I live in LA, but a lot of the story is again, our founder Alex's kind of experiences growing up in the Pacific Northwest, which is again, we're talking like kind of Washington, Oregon, west of the United States, but it's very foresty, as you can see. It's very foggy and rainy at times. But it is also like the source of so many strange, unexplained things. One story I really love is that PAX West last year, I guess this was last PAX West. So Alex owns this actual car that that you're driving around in, this wood station wagon, and he took a journalist out on a drive during it. And they're driving all around. The journalist, I think, is like taking pictures and just really experiencing what it's like to be in this car. And they go to some parking lot somewhere to take some pictures. Like just, it's dark already, woods surrounded, no lights around. And while they're there taking photos of the car and chatting about the game in the car, they saw these like 2 lights kind of just like bobbing through the trees. One taller and one shorter than the other, and they kind of just bob around and flash around and then disappear after a while. And that was just a very much like, we think it was probably a pair of hikers, maybe someone and their child, but you can never really be sure, right? Like no one emerged from the woods, no one said like, hey, what's up? They just kind of like disappeared. And I feel like everyone just has versions of these stories in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah,
Nicole, I
for
don't know if
sure.
you camp a lot, right? I don't know if you've had kind of some experiences you'd rather not remember.
I don't think I've ever had anything like properly I would rather not remember. But yeah, there's definitely a huge aspect of the Pacific Northwest that um, it the kind of like fog and the rain almost lure you into like this perceived softness in a sense of like, oh, it's just like foggy and things are a little bit like blurry and like the rain usually makes you feel pretty cozy and you're like, oh, I want to stay inside. But definitely like getting out into the forest and in the fog, it suddenly feels very different than the way it feels in a city, right? Of like suddenly feels very eerie when you like turn around and you can only see like 10 feet behind you, or you like see a shadow in the fog or something like that. And I feel like that was definitely something that Alex, our Alex definitely did a lot of the tech art for the team, but obviously like the art team and everything put a ton of effort. Oh, my bad. It's fine. It's fine. Um,
What was that? Nothing to worry about.
it's all right. But yeah, they definitely put a lot of effort into really capturing that like Pacific Northwest vibe of having the fog around and the diffuse light and the way that, trying to peer through the distance through the trees and into the fog feels and what it's like to be isolated through that. Because I feel like that's a really big piece of the feeling and the narrative of the game is that level of isolation, right? Of like you never get to really like meet anybody. You never come across anybody. It's just lots of close encounters and lots of things that make you wonder if you're alone, but maybe not.
Yeah, it's always as a kind of like person who writes, and does narrative in video games, like what a lucky thing it is to have this like confluence with, a design team, like I said, with kind of making sure the car, the mechanics and everything you do as a player has these elements that tell a story behind it, but also the art team, right? Like Nicole was saying, look at everything that is like put into this world and how much story the world is telling you just from looking around. Like, what is that up there? Why are those train carriages just kind of floating in the middle of the sky? And what is that blue light around it? You're heading into a gas station right now, right? Like, again, like why? Well, why is Nicole running over stop signs? First of all, um,
I am a professional driver, thank you very much.
um, but yeah, like everyone just kind of like up and left, right? Like interesting, like that sign is lit up. It still has electricity. There's so many questions we have around this world, and something we embodied through the environment, the gameplay, and the actual literal like VO and lore that we deliver to you is the zones indifference to you, right? It's very otherworldly. It's got all sorts of secrets and horrors. You know, a lot of people ask us like, why did you decide to make a horror game or why is it so scary? And it's like it totally can be really scary, but there are no traditional jump scares, right? There is no um this is not a horror game in the traditional sense of we're not out there showing you gore and having things grab onto you and attack you. Again, in the traditional sense, it's more about eeriness, right? Like, it could be just like as in real life, if you're in the dark and there's a squirrel like jumping off of a tree next to you and you don't see the squirrel, you're like, oh my God, was that a squirrel or was that Bigfoot about to eat me? And you don't know, and it's more about that environment like pressing in on you on all sides.
Yeah, I think that's also an aspect of like the horror. Well, I think it's more accurate to call it kind of like spooky than horror, is definitely an aspect that I think the core team and anybody who's worked on the game for any amount of time has forgotten about is the sense of the unknown. You were saying like, is it a squirrel or is it Bigfoot? For players who are starting out in that kind of like, you don't know what we've put in the woods. Maybe it is Bigfoot. Maybe it isn't.
Yeah, I think it's been so fun to not answer questions that we get
Yes.
from some of the players, right? Because like people will ask me like, "Oh my gosh, I think I saw Bigfoot. Is that in the game, and I'm like, I don't know, what did you think you saw?
That's
Like,
crazy, really? That's
that's
wild.
yeah, yeah. You know, that's just like real life. People talk about Bigfoot all the time, but mm,
Yeah.
I ain't seen him.
Especially
I live in LA.
Yup. I mean, hey, maybe he wanted to go on vacation, you know?
He could probably surf. I could see it.
Yeah. You gotta get into the sunshine every once in a while.
Hmm.
But yeah, that same kind of aspect of, you said, like, having fun not answering questions was a really great piece of seeing people finally get their hands on the game the first couple of times that we were doing demos for events like GDC and PAX and that kind of thing, and definitely seeing how much the mystery and, like, a lot of the narrative is kind of dished out in a very alluding way. You know, there isn't much of it that is like outright like, this is what happened and when it happened and how it happened and why it happened. You know, it is part of the spook is the mystery and figuring out and unraveling what has gone down here on your own, you know?
Yeah, much like I was saying before with the scanning, one important thing we wanted to have with this game was to, of course, have a story, have it be as, you know, pervade the environment, the world, everything that you're doing, but also make it kind of, I don't want to say optional, but something you experience along the way, right? So we've mainly talked over all of the VO at this point, but you'll notice like we haven't given you any cutscenes. We haven't like stopped and like forced the car to brake as you listen to these people kind of like talking at you. And you know, there were discussions early on about whether we needed some moments like that, if not for the entire game, then for like critical story beats. But what we landed on ultimately was that we never take control of that camera away from you. Um, and kind of all of the pros and cons of that. The pro is that if you're like a power gamer like Nicole is here, um, just you know collecting and scavenging and doing anything and knowing how to avoid those anomalies, you can just do that and not feel kind of impatient because we're delivering to you like a 3-minute cutscene. On the flip side, the con is that you can be like have an anomaly dragging your car off the cliff. You could be kind of in the middle of a zone storm, which is this thing that closes in on you when conditions get rough. And the story could still be happening at the same time, and you aren't given a moment to like listen to it unless you pause or you know like it's all the VOs recorded in the logbook so you can play it back at any time. But that was a conscious decision and one I get questions about whether like that is intentional or not, right? Because yeah, we're allowing anything to happen in this game, as you can kind of see.
Yeah, and I think that really lends to the kind of feeling like you were mentioning earlier when you guys were deciding about like, oh, is there a main character? Like, what is the real focus that we're trying to put here? And part of that narrative focus is that, you know, this isn't really like, you are not the main hero here, right? Like, you are certainly the protagonist. You have a goal. There is something you are trying to do, but like the zone isn't really waiting for you. It's not here for you. It isn't intentionally trying to kill you or take you out or anything like that. It is, you're just here like trying to do your thing, and the zone is also just trying to do its thing.
Yeah, and a lot of times those are at odds, right? Like the people who talk to you, help you, also, you know, if you were to disappear tomorrow, they'd be sad. They got some things they want out of you, but uh
They're
they're
invested, but
yeah, they're invested, but they're living life, and you know, if you want to just kind of just chill or give up and lay down or say hi to those friendly tourists that Nicole is weaving through right now.
they're
Um,
friends.
you can do that. And I like that because I think so much of storytelling is like I'm a very character focused writer in a lot of senses. Like and you know, as we talk about story, you'll start to hear that. But there are characters in the game, and like Nicole said, like you can have a lot of opinions about who the main character is or who the protagonist is, but you're totally right in that it is not the player character, although all of the stories come from you, right? Like your experience with this car, your experiences on these drives are your own alone. But we're not ascribing any sort of character traits to you besides that you drive a car. Couldn't get around that one.
You are definitely capable of holding tools. You have probably opposable thumbs.
We don't know. We can't see your hands. You could just be like making it work, in any sort of way.
It's actually flippers. That is the secret.
We never said you were not Bigfoot. Ever think about that? um, Gosh, yeah. So as we are kind of going through this, can talk a little bit about the characters that you're going to encounter. So, as we mentioned earlier, so you are a driver who gets a little too close to the border of a exclusion zone. You get sucked in. You're not sure why or how, and you get sucked into this exclusion zone that is full of radiation and anomalies and danger, and you don't see another living soul, except that you find this car who seems to be able to get you around, and over the car radio, there are 3 people who are longtime zone residents. They've lived there for decades. They've chosen to live there for decades in complete isolation, and they talk to you through the car radio and help you survive. The player character doesn't talk back to them. It's a one-way, right? You kind of receive a radio, but you don't have a transmitter back to them. And they help you out as you explore this world. And I think, like, again, one of the weirdest parts of this world is the car itself. It binds itself to you. 2 of the characters, Francis and Tobias, identify your car as a long-lost urban legend called a remnant, as I mentioned earlier. And the story is kind of you investigating that and trying to keep yourself alive. Are you actually driving something that they call the remnant? Is it just total garbage and they're crazy because they're in this zone? Another theory I really like is, like, are these people even real? They certainly talk to you and they certainly hear you in this game, but you never meet them. So you could just be hearing voices in your head, right? Because it's a lot about isolation and what it does to a person and the effects it has both on you as a player and the player characters you are talking to.
Yeah, and I think there's also a really important part, but also one of my favorite parts of that ties into the fact that all of these people are so distant, really enforces the kind of relationship that you have with the wagon, right? And part of that feeds into the whole, like, is it a remnant? Is it slowly driving you mad? Is it trying to steal your brains? But part of it is that, like, it's almost like done willingly, right? Like, the car is going to keep you alive and you have to keep it alive so it can keep you alive. Like, it is a very symbiotic kind of loving relationship. I mean, at least it is for me. I take care of my wagon, but there's definitely, you can make a choice to abuse your wagon if you so choose. Not that I would recommend it for your own safety. But that was also one of the things that really drew me into working on this project when I first talked with Alex. Is like, I've always been a huge car person, and like fixing cars and having a relationship to the car that you have and figuring out like we'd mentioned earlier, the little quirks of like what makes a car feel like it's yours and the things that, you get used to of like, oh, well, this door doesn't shut right and this window will only roll down if you're not rolling down the other windows, and those kinds of things that really make it feel like it is something that you have a personal relationship with and isn't just like in a lot of other video games they'll give you a vehicle and it is just that. It is just a vehicle, right? And it often has like maybe a health bar, and it is just a means to an end.
Yeah, and similarly for me, as I was like breaking story with Alex to kind of figure out what we wanted to tell about this game, I am not a car person. Like, I do love the cars that I drive here. Again, I'm from Los Angeles, so I live and die by my car. But I've never seen it as more than anything than just like something that gets me from place to place. I've felt this way about other games as well. I've never really developed an affinity for the things that I, am transported around in. Even though even if I play a game like this where I am poring over every inch of it, I don't personally develop that relationship. And yet this car becomes so much of a character, right? Like, through the quirks. You can bet we had discussions about whether at any point through hallucination or otherwise, this car would kind of like Knight Rider you and talk to you. Like really serious discussions about that because we all, whatever, like love Knight Rider. But spoilers, it doesn't talk to you. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, oh shit. Hey,
Ooh,
give me that.
something doesn't want you to have that.
Everything is fine. It's fine.
Ah!
It's very okay. No.
But something I love from, oh god, players early on is that a lot of people named their cars. Like, there's no way you can't like type it into the game, but
Yeah.
a lot of people are referring to the cars with a name. Did you name your car?
Of course I named my car. I immediately
Yeah?
named my car, like, soon after I started. And it is a little bit of a blatant reference, but I named my car Christine, so.
Christine.
Yep.
Very nice. And I, a car person, or not a car person, did not name my car.
No.
I was the one kind of like just bare minimum car parts, just trying to get through and try to shortcut everything to extreme failure. It doesn't work, but um, but yeah, and that's kind of why for me, when I thought about like this game has a very strong appeal to people who love cars, right? If you love cars, you're going to take an immediate liking to this. If you love spooky forests and this type of environment, you're going to like it. But I also wanted to write stories for people who maybe didn't like those things. And as I mentioned before, I'm a very like, when I write stories, I'm a very character focused person. And I thought like, if you match together all the things we wanted where, you and the relationship with your car is so much of the focus of the game. We have this world that has all these mysteries, and then we have a player character who you don't, see. We don't impress any personality upon you, and doesn't, most importantly, have a voice. And that is why we kind of have this introduction of the three main characters who talk to you. So I mentioned Tobias and Francis before, who you've heard that we've been completely talking over. There are two kind of folklorists, like kind of tinfoil hat wearing people who live in the zone. And then we have Oppie, who's this curmudgeonly, cranky old woman who is like a kind of a genius who was involved with the government experiments going on here. Wow. Sorry, I'm you're
very
just
sorry, sir. I've broken into his home and am now just gonna take all your stuff.
yeah.
Don't
You're
worry
gonna disturb
about
his floaty rocks. Yo, that's a cool house though. I would live there.
I mean, yeah, it's a very specific kind of aesthetic, anti-gravity rocks.
And just a little radiation. You can see her health ticking down, but it's no problem.
It's fine.
Nicole isn't scared.
It's fine.
Everything's fine. Ooh, I'd love that. Oh, that's so cool.
Definitely seeing the headlights poke through the trees and through the fog and everything is just very good.
Shout out to the art team once again. This game is, every time I look at it, it's more and more beautiful. I notice more and more.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there's so much of this narrative and the storytelling that comes through the art as well, right? Like, all of this is stuff that isn't necessarily, there's something that I learned forever ago and I think about a lot is the like narrative kind of show don't tell. And I think there's a lot of really juicy things that the art team has done with that, of putting graffiti on things and, like this house was locked before I got into it, and the kinds of, there's a tourist in here, like, wonder what.
Why? Why is he in
means.
there?
Like, how long have you been locked in there, my friend?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Was
just
that a person or was it a tourist to begin with?
What kind of tourist are you? Yeah. But yeah, just the kind of like care for the story and the world that the entire team has put into it. It was definitely not just like writing in the corner trying to slap a story over a video game.
Yeah, writers wish they had the ability to do art as good as this. Why would we spend hours grinding our teeth over a paragraph that, maybe some people will read versus just like make a beautiful house with crazy floating rocks and a mannequin like slumped in the middle of it. And that tells you so much more, and invokes so much. And I love that. I was shouting at, Larry and Jade for their beautiful, like their insane art, that they did. So as we continue to meander along, we split narrative in the traditional sense, what you can think of as, kind of the things you hear, voiceover, or text, into many different chunks that we present to you in different ways. Again, because we can never really truly predict what a player will be doing at any given time. Whether they're heading towards the story mission or they're just going off to loot. We split it and delivered narrative in a bunch of different ways to try to take account for the fact that you might be doing a number of different things. And sometimes you want narrative and sometimes you don't. And we can only do our best at guessing that. And the first way that you experience the most of is kind of what we called like mission critical VO. So it's most of what you've been hearing already that reflects that mission step you see in the upper right corner, right? So right now, you're supposed to get the car close to the anomaly in the middle of the town. That's the glowing blue thing with all the train parts floating around it. And your primary person there who's helping you out is Oppie. Again, that embittered old scientist woman, and she is kind of just giving you what the layout of the land, like, go do this. This is why you're doing it, and why it's important. So right now you are trying to get your car close to that anomaly. It happens to be one of the biggest anomalies around. And if you get the car close to it, they might be able to induce kind of the resonant frequency in it to test whether it is a remnant or not, this urban legend that Tobias and Francis keep yammering on about.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a important piece of that like Oppie is definitely the embittered part of this is really important. Oppie is not just like telling you what to do and why you need to do it. Oppie's just kind of like, I suppose you could take the opportunity if you want it, as long as you don't break any of my stuff and it doesn't inconvenience me. So it is definitely so much of like your own motivation and how you want to do it, and at your own danger. Oppie doesn't have really many stakes in it at this point, so.
Yeah, she's very much like the Zone in a lot of ways, where doesn't care. Actually, she'd prefer you dead, kind of. She said so at the beginning of the game, because that garage you are in was hers as well. That equipment is hers, and she doesn't care about you, and she is helping you out grudgingly so, for the time being. If you feel like you can trust her, but she isn't so much as bothered if you want to go off and, not listen to her and play 100 hours of the game without like doing the mission she gives you. So be it. You can do that, and we're respecting kind of player agency there of what you want to do.
Yeah, and very, very literally, right? Like our missions screen in the route map, as you can see here that we picked at the beginning, like every single one of these is not mission related. There's definitely lore, like we'd mentioned earlier, the scanning that you can come across and discover more about the world and the story there, but the main missions are kind of marked by these diamond markers here, and those are not something that is ever, like, the player is never railroaded into those, kind of through the same principle that you had mentioned earlier, Karrie, about not ever taking control from the player, like in a minute sense or in a larger, like, you have to go here kind of sense. Like, you could totally discover a pretty big chunk of the map before you would have to do any of the mission stuff.
Yeah, and you can create your own reasons for going there. You could go there and scan a bunch of things, right? As you saw earlier, Nicole scanning stuff, or you could just go to find parts for your car because you want to find different paint colors or upgrade your bumpers, and the world kind of supports that. The game supports that as much of the narrative as you want. which is really important for us as we made this game. I talked about mission critical VO, so that's the stuff that you'll hear, and I'll pause the next time that triggers. And it does auto play, right? As soon as you get to the important thing you have to do, they will inform you what and how you're supposed to be doing something. The next way we deliver VO is through transmissions, and it's kind of optional to play stuff. So you'll see kind of like it's like kind of akin to getting a phone call or like a voicemail, and it just delivered to you, and that's kind of a little bit more additional story content, so it relates to where you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it, but it's a little bit extra, right? So if you kind of want to just drive around and hit the points and do the things Oppie tells you to, you can. If you want to know what their theory is, maybe why they're making you take this car right up to that giant radiating anomaly, which seems like a really bad idea. If you want to, understand a little bit more about or question why Oppie's so mad at everybody or hates Francis and Tobias a lot, like you can hear those conversations. And then Nicole, if you don't mind, so sorry, as you're in the middle of looting right now, if you can go to those transmissions in the logbook. So everything's like recorded for you, including the mission critical VO I mentioned earlier. So if it happens to play while you are in the middle of looting, you can access them all here and replay them kind of as you like. So you can kind of get the text log of it, and you can, press play and cue them and just understand what people are talking about.
Yeah.
And something I felt, as much as I wanted to make you listen to everything and like really dial into making a player pay attention, it's really hard when you're driving, let alone escaping a storm or looting. Like, it's a different part of your brain, right? If you listen to a podcast at home, and I like personally when I'm driving and listening to podcasts, I have to rewind a lot because I'm not always paying attention.
Yeah.
So having that, some of it be optional, some of it be direct because you need to know what it is to do next. And as well as being like, oh, maybe I'm back at my garage, or I'm on a really long road that is not so dangerous, then I can listen to it then, was a critical way we decided to deliver narrative for this game.
Yeah, and especially having those like rereadable for even the critical mission ones, so if you do happen to miss it because of the chaos unfolding around you, it isn't something that you're like, well, too bad, so sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I recognize like the difficulty of having multiple characters talking is that they're in conversation. Generally, that means a conversation is going to take a lot more time, right, to convey what it needs to convey to you versus like one player just being like, "Hey, you might be wondering why you're driving onto this bridge. Well, let me tell you," right? Like I avoided that. Like that was my number one mission, was to avoid that type of stuff because I am so like aware of the point of view of not only the player and me hearing this stuff as a player, but also of the characters talking to you, right? These characters are all 50 to 80 years old. They have been in this exclusion zone alone for like, I don't know, 30 years. They probably haven't talked to anyone new for over 20 years. And they've had all these same conversations over and over again. They're bored, right? They're not going to sit there and explain stuff to each other. Francis and Tobias like live together. And so like they've every possible conversation they could have had in their life, they've had it already like 10 different times. And so they speak to you in a certain way. They don't always explain stuff to you. And also they kind of can follow where you are by means of a very crude GPS, as you can see on that passenger seat map. But they don't see exactly what they're seeing, right? They don't have like a dash cam like looking out and seeing what you're seeing. I did not mention this before. This game is set in 1999 or 98, 99. So we don't have the technologies we do now, where we could just be like hovering over you or like watching you, through a satellite or something like that. We haven't found one yet in this map, but something that another way we deliver lore. So we've got the kind of the mission critical VO that auto plays. We have the transmission VO that gets delivered optionally. We have the scanning and logbook that we mentioned earlier. One of my favorite things to write and record and find are the audio collectibles. So sometimes when you're out on a run, you'll find on a map this little, like,
Oh,
what do you call that? It's like, it's not a shed. It's like a little
I've
call
made driving
box thing.
mistakes. Ah,
Ooh,
everything's fine. It's fine. We're good.
that's what we mentioned. Could
I
be
was-
falling down a cliff and trying to
Lose
listen
track
to
of
lore.
what's being said. Oh, I broke my only headlight.
Oh no, we need light.
We'll fix it.
Dark, Nicole.
You know, this is fine. This is a good safe distance to stop and repair my headlight real quick. It's fine.
But we have these audio collectibles that kind of represent the third pillar of actual voice to VO you get. And as you're out exploring the zone, you're going to find these little waypoints where you'll pick up a recording. And the recording is kind of like a true crimey, like 2020 investigative journalism newscast that you find in parts, where it is someone who interestingly lives outside of the zone, investigating everything that happened within, right? So to the outside world, you know, we're seeing the zone right now, but to the outside world, all they knew was the Olympic Peninsula got walled off over the years where the base was in operation, and they would see strange
respond.
lights and strange rumors.
Maybe you need to get closer to
some VO.
Cappy's core way up there. Can you find a way to high ground?
I'm not sure I want to get that close to it, Auntie. but
Get
thank
closer.
you.
It's safe.
It's fine.
Don't
Nothing
worry.
looks wrong here at all. Oh boy.
That was an example of the mission the critical VO I mentioned, right? So Api tells you something, she gives you context, and then you see in the upper right the mission task updated that said drive up to the bridge to get closer to the anomaly. Because Api wants to run a little experiment on you. Ooh, we're kind of close, right? Wait.
We do have the bridge right here.
Mm-hmm.
Car's still not close enough to Cappy.
What now?
How about launching the car into Cappy's core?
I'm sorry. What?
It's simple. The driver jumps the car into the heart of the anomaly, and if I time it right, I'll open the gateway and extract them.
And if you don't?
I've run some calculations. I think it should be fine. Anyway, it's like they always say, what's an experiment without some risk of total annihilation?
Who says that exactly? In no way, shape, or form should we be doing this.
Well, but you know, if it's the only way, you got this kid for it.
Well, if it's the only way. Gotta get this.
Shout out to our voice cast, our insanely good voice cast. I got to be in all the recording sessions, and I could listen to them all day. We've got Tara Langella as Oppie, Jeff Wong as Tobias, and Michael Turner as Francis, who were just joyous and so good with the script. And my God, I just want to say, like, we're so terrified of casting for them because they're all kind of characters who are older. They all have very specific sounds, and we also wanted to when talking with NYAV post our recording studio, you know, we discussed what we wanted the recording to sound like. You know, do you want it to sound very anime? Do you want it to sound video game? And we wanted to sound very cinematic, right? It is a sci-fi story. It is very real world. And so we wanted to sound cinematic, like this is a serious story we're telling you. And we were terrified of trying to cast Oppie because she is just, I love her so much. She is, again, she's like in her 80s. She is a very specific point of view. She is whip smart. She is rude as hell.
Oh yeah.
I know she's ticked off a few players, which is what she was meant to do. She makes fun of you constantly. One of my favorite lines that can pop when you return to the garage is she's like, just wondering, did you have a driver's license prior to coming into this zone? I can't really tell. Just curious.
Yeah, yeah. I think I remember one of my favorite moments coming back from the garage was I had been testing something and had intentionally died, and this was well into my QA testing. So I didn't die on accident. I had to die, and I got back,
Mm-hmm.
and Oppie was like, you're not supposed to just stand in the radiation. And just the amount of sass that she will give you for just the littlest mistakes the entire time is just so very specifically charismatic. And I remember when you guys were sharing some of the clips when you were trying to decide from who to cast for it, like some of the first recordings that had come through from Tara were just like absolutely incredible, and everybody was just like sat there listening to one of those first clips and was like, "Yep, this is it. We've done it. This is Oppie." And it was such an amazing moment to hear that come to life.
Yeah, it was insane. Like the person I thought we would have to, or the character we would have to kind of search high and wide for, got it on the first round of auditions. She nailed it, and that again, so much credit to NYAV Post, to Stephanie Shea, our casting director, and then Michael Sinter Nicholas, who was directed all the sessions and was in the booth with us. Like they are experts at what they do, and they got us so much of our cast on the first round. um, and they're professionals, and yeah, they just uh they just dubbed over a little movie called The Boy and the Heron, Miyazaki's latest film. You might have heard of it. Just won an Oscar. So privileged to work with them, and they're incredible people. Here we go.
Alright. I'm sure
Nicole is
this will
decided to
be
trust Oppie.
fine.
Mm-hmm.
Oppie's not currently drunk.
Oppie? Any fun now, Oppie?
Probably.
Probably. Ooh, who was that? That was weird. Hmm.
Oh boy. Oh no. It's fine. It's fine. Oh, my windshield. No.
Can you hear me? Cappy fried my transmission systems. Thought I lost you for a moment. Well, it all worked out, didn't it? The gateway got you out.
And it looks like the ARC device is still intact with all
And
the
here's
payouts
Oppie giving
recorded
you
from your
some
drive.
context to what you just did. I'm going to talk over it.
My plan worked. Cappy amplified the
So
car signal and it matches.
yeah,
Select
that was
device.
the whole
Francis
mission.
held
As you
their
can
remnant
see,
after
kind of
all.
how some of the VO was
Unfortunately,
demonstrated
what they've been
and
saying is
delivered.
true.
I did
Remnants
cut myself off
drive their
earlier when I was
victims
talking about
mad.
the audio
Maybe that
collectibles. So really
car,
quick,
having
hopefully
sat
we'll
dormant
go
for
out
this
and
long, will
another
give it
run.
one
We'll
more
see if we can
time.
find one.
Sorry, I don't have better news for
But
you.
there's an extra story being
I'm still
told
game
that
to get you
tells
out of
the
here.
story
How
of
fast
the
do you leave?
game and the world from an
Longer
outside
you'll have to enjoy
perspective.
the rest of your sanity.
And those are some of my favorite parts. If you haven't found any, it's
None of
kind
the
of this
routes you've mapped so
standalone
far
form of
leads to a
storytelling
way
I got
out.
to do.
Why don't you head back
Um,
out and chart somewhere?
and that's
You can
voiced
get
by
in touch with
Erica
Tobias and
Ishii,
Francis while you're out
voicing
there.
Chiaki, who's the lead on that part of
So good.
the world. Ah, she's so good. Um, and I know because of the Steam stats that not everyone's found all of the collectibles. They're kind of hard to find,
Yes.
but it was so fun to be able to tell, like, there's so many perspectives from which we got to tell the story, right? We got to tell the player's experience as you drive through this world. We got to tell the stories of these characters who are largely, again, you never meet them, and they're having all of their feelings about what you're doing. The things you do are affecting them as far as their own lives go and their pasts. And they're reacting to all these things. And then you have this third layer with the audio collectibles where the outside world still wonders what happened with this zone. All they have are, like, newspapers from that time, government records, publicly available filings and stuff, legal battles of what happened here. And she's, sifting through it as you're kind of experiencing it in real time. And I have it was such an interesting way to tell the story, but it allowed me to write from a lot of different perspectives and have it kind of like come together in this way that, you know, we're never telling you the exact story of what happened here. There is no tome you're going to find in the world that's just like zone history, you
Here's
know,
the
A
truth
to
of
Z.
everything always.
Mm-hmm. And that was intentional in the type of story we were trying to tell in the world we were creating. And yeah, I hope that is something that people enjoy.
Oh, bummer.
Don't see podcast. They're actually hard to find. Like, I mean, you have played 2,000 hours of this game, but
I have definitely heard the entire podcast. Yes.
oh, it's great. And God, like, shout out to I did not mention this. So Shell in the Pit did so much of our audio. They put together these great audio and these like the podcast program is called Frequency Files. They created this awesome like 90s twangy intro for that sequence. But they also did all the sound design in this game, and it's insane. Like, you really got to play this game with like good speakers or good headphones, because as much as I talked about the environment informing the world around you and these weird things that you see, you also hear crazy things out in the wild. And when like you pull an anchor or a storm comes, it's like, it is so scary. And again, we mentioned it is not a horror game in the traditional sense, but my God, that like I have to turn down the audio sometimes because it's very scary.
Oh yeah,
So
they did
what?
such a good job
What do you
making
mean,
it
what?
spooky.
Hallucinations, like the ones from 1961. It happened again, just a quick blip, like blinking you. Wait, you didn't see it?
I was in a total blackout. Colossal Cappy fried my systems.
Right, because sending the driver headfirst into Cappy didn't work out like you said it would. Big surprise.
Oh, spare me, Francis.
The driver's alive and your remnants verified. Isn't that all you wanted? Now, why are you two yapping about the mass hallucination?
When Cappy amplified the remnant signal, it triggered another
Oh boy.
hallucination event.
Oh dear.
It lasted 3 seconds.
Oh no!
And not
fine.
only that, we picked up that its source was northwest of us, specifically.
Yeah, somewhere in the deep zone.
That's impossible.
Great, that was another scan, so that's in the logbook now.
Heck yeah. More info.
Just some friendly bunnies, no big deal.
Just some friends.
And as you can see here, so what happened was we, finished the mission and we're out on another drive. And in this case, it does happen to be kind of like what you're supposed to do next. But you can just go on these drives and the story will continue to happen.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Path
Ooh.
Known podcast.
What's this?
coming to you over your radio. We are live here.
I
and
love
I'm joined by my
I love these so much. So
This hallucination wave
Oh.
that triggered.
RVO's interrupting it.
Francis is
turns out
very
it's equal
pertinent.
and opposite to the remnant's wave.
she's got things to say. When you're out in the world, just like in real life, you can kind of like, you're driving around with your radio on and you can get like kind of interferences on your radio, right? Sometimes it's static, sometimes it's like a commingling of different radio stations on the same like bandwidth. But you can also just hear weird voices sometimes through people's walkie-talkies or anything else, again, using the same, radio bandwidth that exists and is publicly accessible. And you heard the start of one of that. It was that Forgotten Zones Forgotten Zone podcast that we just heard. And most of those voices you hear are members of the dev team and really close friends, including Nicole has a couple clips in there too.
Yeah, everybody had a ton of fun putting those in because it was another, like we were talking about earlier, the entire team has been very invested in the world and the story and that kind of thing. And being able to like come up with our ideas to put into the game as these kinds of like little snippets of the world that you would find around was just so much fun. There was a couple of us like collabed with other team members to put stuff in for it. And it was just really entertaining, and it has really added to the depth of, making the world this kind of like found aspect of where it isn't force fed to you. You just kind of slowly get more bits and pieces of like what's happening around you, and it definitely adds to the spooky ambiance of like maybe there's more out there than you've been able to find yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for lore reasons, like, the only communication that has still like withstood the test of time and also all of the stuff that's going on in this zone is radio waves, right? People would kind of be in their houses scattered around this zone and talking, kind of through radio to each other or just out into the world because they're extremely bored. If a storm's coming through and they can't leave their house and they haven't left their house in the last like 20 days, this is supposed to reflect them just talking out to the world and being really bored. And the recordings, we let everybody play within this world. There's kind of some ghost hunting conversations. There are commercials for various zone establishments. You'll hear Kendall, our level designer, giving a couple commercials, voicing a couple commercials. There's weather reports. There are people just kind of like sharing too much information out to the world because, again, they just haven't met anyone new in 20 years. And for me, what a gift it was to have everybody's voices in the game. It really captured like a time capsule where we were all working on this game together. This was before the game came out, and we just got to invent and play and do things that are we don't usually get to do in our day-to-day job when we're mired in code or testing or script or Maya or whatever, modeling something. I was so happy to be able to do that with the team, and so definitely keep an ear out for those like the radio kind of interruptions and see if you can identify some of them.
It's also been fun for the team to kind of like poke through which of these and be like trying to remember and be like, is that Kendall? Is that Jacob?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like why is Jacob saying those weird things?
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's probably mostly it for the stream. Unless, can we show maybe the fax machine really quick while we're back at the garage?
Yeah.
We might not have that
I owe
unlocked,
you
huh?
an apology.
Let me
I
check
screwed
if
up.
I
I
can
nearly
build
got
it
you
real
killed.
quick, though.
The
Might be
things I
something
used to
we have
calculate
access
as
to.
easily as turning a screwdriver, they're foggy now. The numbers don't work themselves out like they used to. I haven't been myself for a long time, but I haven't needed to be.
We might
It's
be.
been me
No.
and this cursed place
Well,
I created
maybe.
and nothing else
Maybe.
for decades.
Hold on.
But now, knowing that
Gears.
whatever caused the mass hallucination
okay.
is still out
So
there,
we'll make
I
some
need
of
to know what it is
those.
and why the remnants are connected to it. Francis was right about the remnant and the mass hallucinations paired signals. If we can get them together, maybe they'll cancel each other out and you'll be free. It's a shaky theory at best, but it's the only lead we've got for now. You can do nothing and twiddle your thumbs until that remnant drives you mad. Or, if you're willing to work with me, I'll give you the best chance to survive this thing. Think it through. And fix up your car while you're doing it. You'll need to for whatever you decide from here. Are you making use of my fabrication station to fix up that junker?
I am.
You should while I'm still in the mood to allow it.
Robbie, how did you
And there's
know?
the test track behind the garage, if you need to take anything for a spin.
Yeah, I think we might be able to hop into the
Ooh.
fax machine here. That in.
Yeah. Oh dang. Circuit board.
Oh no.
There was also a prerequisite. I don't know if we had it.
We'll see. And of course, I'm just laughing to myself because this is one of the things that I had designed, so I have nobody to blame but myself.
Thanks, past Nicole.
If only I had known this moment. I think we may be
Oh,
okay.
hey. Dang.
Pack ratting tendencies have come in handy for this very
It
moment.
is incredible to watch someone play this game and not just like stare at these menus for hours. Like it's just what I have to do. Be like, I need what? How many parts? Oh, I don't have that resource. I didn't know to get it.
Yep, yeah.
This is what a real gamer looks like, folks.
You know, just a couple 100 hours to learn it all, that's all. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah! I think we get, do we get a free fax?
Yeah.
Come on. Let's do it. Yes!
Ooh.
Ooh,
This
mysterious.
Let's see if
And
it's a
that's
98. Oh, it's too late. Oh no.
No, it's too late!
Bummer. We'll never know.
Another little like lovely tidbit of narrative, again headed up by Paul Dean, who wrote all those lovely entries, all those unhinged entries, I should say. When you return from a run, you'll get a little snippet, and much like the radio transmissions you get when you're out in the world, they're pretty random. They will sometimes reflect someone just being really bored and just like sending missives out into the world, or they could be, you know, government things or things from sources that may or may not be human.
Yeah. Yeah, this is another one of those, like the logbook records, not the podcast recordings, but you'll just find some records out in the world that you can also put into the fax machine to sort through that are just kind of spoon-fed tidbits of lore.
Yeah, and you'll see like this one right here with the ARDA category reference up there. That's like a government record, and we have, you know, stuff written from the perspective of residents who were just spending their day to day trying to live life. There are people who are, yeah, complaining about their jobs or sharing recipes or their bad poetry. We, you know, really try to populate this world because it has, you know, 50 years of history or more in this world, but all the people are gone, so you can see the remnants of what they left behind, and find it as you explore.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is Pacific Drive and all of the narrative that we can dig into right now.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. If you play the game, if you haven't already, check us out on Steam and PS5, and have a good time with it. I'm Karrie, Shao. This is Nicole, Olson, and thanks for spending time with us.